Welcome back to another video on the No Sleep for Dramas podcast channel, and also welcome back to part 2 of my exploration of the Studio Ghibli movies. A little background on this before we dive into my reviews. I have always been a fan of Studio Ghibli, but I've never seen every single movie they ever made, and now that HBO Max has all of them, for the most part, except for one, I'm watching all of them in chronological order. If you have not watched part 1 of this series, it is linked below and also will be at the end of this video. Right now, stay tuned for my review of the next 5 movies that I watched that are in chronological order with my ratings, my opinions, and at the end, my ranking of all of the movies I watched. If you have seen Studio Ghibli and have seen any of these movies, please comment below of what you thought of some of these movies or maybe one of some of your favorites. Let's get into these reviews because I have a lot to say about Studio Ghibli and the 5 movies I am reviewing on this. If you are curious of the videos reviewed in this video, it is going to be Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, Castle in the Sky, My Neighbor Totoro, Kiki's Delivery Service, and Grave of the Fireflies in chronological order from when they were released. Let's get into the first movie. Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind was a movie released in 1984. It is the last movie that Studio Ghibli released before Studio Ghibli was a studio. A lot of their movies prior to this, Studio Ghibli was not actually a studio yet. The next movie I'll be talking about will be the first movie they released under Studio Ghibli. I had never seen this movie. Some of these movies I have seen before, some of these not. I had never seen Nausicaa. I'm glad that I finally got around to watching it because I've heard of it. I've heard very good things about it, but I've actually never seen it. If you have not heard of Nausicaa, this movie is a post-apocalyptic setting. It's after a catastrophic nuclear war, and this girl is living in this idyllic valley where the dangers of the outside have not reached. The war has not reached it, the desert, the catastrophic destroying of all life on Earth has not reached the valley, and then it does. The toxins get in. The insects and the enemies and the spreading of these toxins get into the valley and threaten her home. When the airship crashes down, the valley is invaded by an enemy military, and they want to revive a weapon that the crash ship was carrying. She has to stop the humans from invading, but also eventually stop the deadly poison and the insects that have been the threat from the outside of this valley, basically protecting her people and her home. I did not know what this movie really was going into it. I had not read the synopsis, had not read the trailer, so I kind of went into this blind. The bugs in this has a very unique design, and I liked it. They were somewhat scary. I would never want to be living in this world, but also beautiful in a weird way. Remind me a lot of Dune. The huge ohm remind me of the worms in Dune. Also, Nausicaa, the attire that she was wearing to get around this desert like post-apocalyptic environment gave me Dune vibes. It was very much Dune vibes, which I liked. I'm a fan of Dune. This had a lot of messages of coexistence between man and nature, and also an anti-war message, which I feel like between the 4 movies I watched prior to this, as well as the movies that I'm going to be discussing, there's a huge anti-war message and a huge nature conservation environmental message between these movies. It's a common thread I have noticed through the Studio Ghibli movies. I loved the music. The fact that it was kind of scientific techno, it paired very well with the movie. Going along with the anti-war message, there was obviously commentary on the atomic bomb. The attack between the Great Warrior and how he attacked the bugs was very much so the atomic bomb happening. I liked this a lot more than I thought. I'm also a sucker for the Chosen One storylines. I don't know why. I eat them up every time. Even it's probably one of the biggest tropes you find across media across the decades between like Star Wars and a lot of Chinese dramas that I watch. This is the same. Definitely Nausicaa was a chosen one narrative. I also like Nausicaa as a whole. She's a very strong lead. She is independent. She goes out, tries to protect her family, her friends, her people. She is a very strong female lead that you do root for by the end. Overall, this film surprised me a lot because I didn't know what to expect, and it had a lot stronger message than I assumed it would be. Also, it was on one hand very scientific and kind of sci-fi vibe, but also with the invading people, the Tolmekia, I think that's how you pronounce it. They were very much medieval knights. So that mix of sci-fi plus medieval attire fit well together, weirdly enough, which I liked that dynamic. Overall, I rated Nausicaa a 9 out of 10. I was pleasantly surprised by this. It was a trope I loved. It was a story that made sense. I was very surprised that this movie from 1984 impacted me in such a way. And I loved the story. I loved the messages you got from it. Castle in the Sky is the next film that I watched. This came out in 1986. This is a famous Studio Ghibli movie. I, for some reason, have never seen this movie. I've seen scenes. I know of it. I've seen scenes. I know the story. I actually have never actually watched the film from start to finish. If you're one of these people who have never seen Castle in the Sky, this is a steampunk setting, which I like. I always love the aesthetic of steampunk. I feel like they could have gone more in that route. It was very light steampunk, in my opinion. It's more of factory industrialization based. I wish they had gone more into the steampunk. Anyway, it's that setting. You have a girl who is kidnapped by government agents because she has this magical amulet and a connection to this mythical flying city. And while aboard this airship, the ship is raided by pirates, and that causes her to flee and fall from this airship. She then meets a boy named Pazu who catches her as she falls, and her magical amulet also saves her. And he has a connection to this flying city because his father actually saw it and took a picture of it, and he's always wants to find it and accomplish that mission. They set out together to find this floating city and also discover her background and her connection to the city, all while being chased by government agents and teaming up with a band of pirates, which I found to be a lot of fun, because at first you think the pirates are going to be an enemy. I thought the animation for this one was a little bit outdated at times. Other times it was perfectly fine and I liked it a lot, but there was some contrasts from one scene from the other that kind of stood out, kind of took me out of the story a little bit. I love the quote that Shita, the girl, said. She says, and I'm going to read this verbatim so I don't miss it. No matter how many weapons you have, no matter how great your technology might be, the world cannot live without love. I love that quote. The funny thing is about this movie and a lot of Studio Ghibli movies, which now that I've watched 10 of them, a lot of the main characters are children. They're not even like 17, 18 years old. They're children. Shita and Pasu are maybe 13, 14, or like early teens, which somewhat downgraded my rating for this for multiple reasons. I was very uncomfortable with one of the scenes with the pirates trying to get Shita's affection by helping her in the kitchen. Me as an adult watching this, I was like, that's a child. That is a child, and you are all grown-ass men going after this girl. So that made me a little uncomfortable. I love the pirates other than that. They were a lot of fun to watch. There was a lot of comedy in this movie, but that scene was a little uncomfortable because they were going after a literal child. The movie was a little too long. I wanted more lore. Yes, they had a great world building and they started out the lore very well. You wanted to know where the girl came from. You wanted to know her connection to the city. You wanted to know what her magical amulet was going to do. And then along the way, you found out one of the government agents had a connection to the city. But either I missed something or there was not a lot of context to some of these things, because I left this movie with a lot of unanswered questions, in my opinion. I wanted more lore. I wanted more background into some of this story, or even the lore of the city itself. There was a lot of unanswered questions with that. I wanted more lore with that. Again, this movie had a big environmental message and a big anti-war message. Love that. I loved the robot. in it, especially with the scene where they essentially killed the robot by shooting weapons at him in the tower as he saved Sheeta. Loved that scene. Beautifully animated. Gave me like a King Kong reference a little bit. Also, Iron Giant was a big was a big thing I kind of recalled watching this. The lore was not there. I wanted more background. It kind of just abruptly ended. They separated from the city. They left the city. They also separated from the pirates and everything else, and they kind of just went on their way with no explanation of what they were going to do next. I wish they had a little bit more of an ending and had a little bit more context with that. But overall, I gave this an 8 out of 10. I definitely disliked it more than Nausicaa compared to Nausicaa. I think it also did not help that I watched this right after Nausicaa because I saw some similarities with the messaging and even like machines and the anti-war stuff. And compared to Nausicaa, I like Nausicaa better. That was another thing that probably I should have just watched them a little more far apart, but I didn't. I gave Castle in the Sky an 8 out of 10. That is my review of that. Grave of the Fireflies is the next movie I'm going to talk about, and this is by far the one I dislike the most in this video. It was a drastic difference change between Nausicaa and Castle in the Sky, and I think that whiplash of that, because I was watching all of these back to back, did not help its situation. But also, it is a sad movie. It is a really sad movie. I do appreciate the fact that you kind of get the ending at the beginning so you know what you're going to get, because I think that kind of helped me get through the movie because I knew how sad the ending was going to be because you saw it at the beginning. It was just so depressing. And I understand why. Like, this was a commentary, straightforward commentary on Japan after World War II and what they were dealing with and surviving and trying to survive in a post-war environment. But my God, it was depressing. You just slowly watch these kids starve to death. And I had so many mixed feelings about this movie as an adult watching it. I'm so glad I've never seen this movie because I don't think I'd never had access to it. It was one of those more obscure Studio Ghibli movies that you never had access to until now. I definitely know I would not have liked this as a child, and I don't think I would have watched this as a child at all. But I also had some very mixed feelings as an adult watching this because on one hand, you kind of understand the context of the history behind this to an extent. I don't know everything about the reconstruction of Japan after World War II, but I know some things. So as an adult, some of the actions that the adults did toward these two kids, I understand from, for example, in a financial standpoint. The two kids lost everything. They lost their home, they lost their parents. They were sent off to live with a distant relative in the countryside to survive. And as an adult receiving these kids while you're already supporting two other mouths, a husband and another child, and you're adding two more while you're on food rations and there's obviously everything's burned to the ground, there's not a lot of jobs. That's a lot of burden for another adult. So I couldn't help but somewhat sympathize with the adults in at least that decision. On the other hand, though, these kids are in a horrific situation and trying to deal with a lot. And the older one is like 14, 13 years old, and the younger is maybe 4 or 5. So you have a 14-year-old trying to raise his younger sister in a post-World War II setting. And I just had a lot of mixed feelings because as an adult, it's also like, as a 35-year-old watching this, you have these scenes where neighbors are telling this 14-year-old, like, maybe you should go back to the house that you left because you were angry that you weren't able to do anything you wanted because you're not eating enough, you're not living in a safe environment. But he chose not to go back and take his sister back and so survive on his own again, but he resorted to stealing. He didn't get a job. I couldn't help but be very mixed feelings about this. I also found the sister to be somewhat annoying over the course of the entire film, but she was also 4. I can't really fault her for what she did because she, again, was 4. I thought the animation was pretty. I did like the fact that you knew the ending and you knew what you were getting. the plot was really slow. You were slowly watching these people starve to death, and it was not my favorite. It was just not my favorite compared to everything else I watched and compared to what I'm usually used to in Studio Ghibli, and I would never want to watch this again. It was definitely a movie that I'm glad I watched once, but it's so sad. It's so sad, but it's also very important commentary to the time, and it apparently was also based off a semi-biographical short story. So that is understandable when it comes to how straightforward and how realistic this story is and how impactful the story is with how sad it is. But man, it was just a lot of mixed feelings with this between the decisions the characters made or the decisions the characters didn't make, and how reckless some of the decisions the 14-year-old made, but also he was desperate at the same time. I would not recommend this one. It was not my favorite. I rated Grave of the Fireflies a 5 out of 10, and I don't think I will ever watch it again. Moving on to two of probably the most famous Studio Ghibli films, I'm going to talk about My Neighbor Totoro. This movie came out in 1988, and of course, I mean, you have some really, really iconic scenes with this. This takes place in 1950s Japan. You have I think he's a professor, maybe an author. You have a father who relocates to the countryside with his two daughters because their mother is in hospital in the countryside and they want to be closer to her. And so they move into this cottage in the countryside, and the children encounter this spirit of the forest, of the tree, the big tree that's near the house. They befriend this Totoro forest spirit and go on adventures and interact with this spirit and the different other creatures the spirit brings along while living in the countryside to be near their mother. Common messages of ode to nature with this one. Does not have a war message, which was nice for a change. Overall, watching this after Grave of the Fireflies or even some of the other films, this is a children's movie, in my opinion. It is very much a children's movie. And again, I love it. It's very nostalgic. Rewatching this though, because I have seen this movie as an adult. I have not watched this since high school, since 14, 15, 16 years old. It is very much a children's movie. I might have downrated this a little bit because it's very clearly geared towards a child versus a 35-year-old, but it's still really cute to watch. You still get very much entertained by it. As an adult watching this, you do see the themes of loss or the potential of a child losing a parent with a chronic illness. That is a little more subtle in the messaging than what you might get with Grave of the Fireflies, but it's still there. And as an adult, you pick up on those messages. You also have this celebration of imagination and of childhood, idyllic childhood of the two sisters running around the countryside, frolicking with these forest creatures. I love Totoro. He's weird. He's quirky. His teeth don't make sense, but I love their interactions because he's pretty much introduced to these children as well. It's not only the children discovering and exploring this, but it's also him who I don't think has really interacted with children before. He gets introduced to an umbrella and rides around on a top, and there's this cat bus. I love the cat bus. The cat bus is my favorite. I did a little research though, because as I said, this is really, really a children's film. You have a happy ending. You really don't have a lot of angst in it. Granted, there is some dark scenes that you don't notice as a child, but also I found on Reddit, there's some dark theories as well, which I love when I find like existing theories that people might have. So the dark scene at the end, the younger sister gets angry because she can't see her mother because her mother catches a cold. And so she runs off and tries to go to the hospital, which is a fair distance away. I think they said 3 hours from the house. And they find a shoe in the pond. The whole town is searching this pond thinking she drowned, like she is gone. And obviously they find out that that is not her shoe. We do have a happy ending. But some theories with even the happy ending is, one, I found that the mom did pass away at the end, and the last trip that the kids make to the hospital is actually all a dream in the cat bus. And so it's the final goodbye to their mom. The other theory I found, though, is that same trip, that same last trip to the hospital, is they run off to go find their mom and they somehow pass away in the forest while being lost. And their souls are now forever frolicking in the countryside with Totoro and the cat bus. And that whole last journey on the cat bus is basically their journey to the afterlife. And I read that this theory came out of an actual crime that happened in the countryside of Japan with some girls who went missing. I don't think that's actually the theories, the dark theories. I don't think that's actually the case with this movie, but I always like finding darker theories or different theories that people come up with this movie. I gave My Neighbor Totoro an 8.5 out of 10, only because it's a little more on the child side and definitely a movie geared towards children. And as a adult watching it, I definitely saw that a little bit. And so that kind of downgraded me a bit. But it's still a very nostalgic movie for me. I love this movie, and obviously it is very well known, and it is justifiably a very popular movie because it's good. It's a very happy, easy watch. Last but certainly not least, we of course have Kiki's Delivery Service. I will tell you right now, I'm going to be very biased with this review because this movie came out in 1989 and it is the first ever Studio Ghibli movie I ever watched in probably middle school. I probably was like 13, 14 when I watched this, and I'm very biased with this. I have a tattoo of the cat of Gigi in this. I'm very biased with Kiki's Delivery Service. So just take that as you will. I gave this movie a 10 out of 10 because it is my favorite Studio Ghibli, or at least one of my favorite Studio Ghibli movies, and a very nostalgic trip with this movie. I'm biased on this review. If you have no idea what Kiki's Delivery Service is, it is about a 13-year-old, again, a child, leaving home by herself, 13-year-old witch, and she has to go to a town and settle down and become a full-fledged witch because right now she's a witch in training. She settles down in a coastal city and she kind of is struggling to find her place and mesh with the people there until she meets this baker and his wife, and she ends up making deliveries and helping around the bakery in exchange for room and board. Before long, she expands on her delivery service and makes it her job, her business in this town. So the entire movie is about her interacting with the townspeople, and then eventually something happens where she has to deal with some confidence issues and dealing with growing up, essentially. This is a coming of age story, which I really much appreciate. As a kid, you're watching this and you don't realize it's like a coming of age story, but as an adult, it's very much a coming of age story. I appreciated that. I appreciated watching this as adult and catching those things that you don't normally notice as a child. Love the message of her losing her powers and trying to find her place without her magic and losing that confidence of what she's going to do and what her skills are going to be, and then refinding that purpose and realizing that she has a place in this town after having to save her friend from falling from this airship that is in town. She is the only one that can save her friend, and so she finds her confidence in flying again through saving her friend. Love the animation of this. I love the relationship she has with the cat, but in hindsight, after watching this, because I don't think I remember this, I don't like that the cat does not talk again at the end, because one of the things that she finds out early on of losing her powers is she can't talk to her cat. Her cat can't talk back. He never talks again, which I find odd. If she can fly again and be a witch again, why can't the cat talk again? The other thing that I noticed as an adult watching this is I didn't understand Kiki and her interactions with her friend, the boy, before she saved him. She was very stuck up about it and kind of standoffish and kind of prideful and saw her as more than these people, or at least her friend, this guy who wanted to build a flying bike, which is weird because she met a very, very arrogant witch at the beginning of the movie. And from that scene, you assume she would think, I don't want to turn out to be that person. And then she kind of does at the beginning when she gets to this coastal town. I much preferred the bickering in My Neighbor Totoro between the older sister and the neighbor boy. I preferred their bickering more than the one in here. That's kind of nitpicking. though, at Kiki's Delivery Service. But again, I'm very biased with Kiki's Delivery Service. Overall, I loved it. It's a 10 out of 10. Uh, even with some faults, it's still a 10 out of 10. That is my review of all of the movies. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you have not seen the first part of this, it is linked below. A quick review of the scores I gave for these movies. You have Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. I gave a 9 out of 10. You have Castle in the City, which I gave an 8 out of 10. You have Grave of the Fireflies, which I gave a 5 out of 10, mostly for the animation. Then you got My Neighbor Totoro, which I gave an 8.5 out of 10. And then Kiki's Delivery Service is a 10 out of 10. If you are curious about part 1, you can watch it right here. Thank you.